Madeline Parker sat by the big window in her room, staring at the gray sky outside. Her small hands rested on the arm of her wheelchair, and her eyes followed the slow movements of the clouds. Today was her 10th birthday. She had imagined it hundreds of times, laughing with friends, eating a big chocolate cake, wearing her favorite pink dress, and feeling the warmth of hugs all around. But reality felt heavy. Her world had changed 2 years ago in a car accident that left her paralyzed from the waist down. Moving was hard, but the loneliness was harder. She had watched her friends from school play tag, run around in the park, and laugh together. Sometimes they waved at her or smiled, but they never came close enough to include her. Her father, Richard Parker, was the CEO of a huge tech company. People admired him, envied him, even feared him at work. They sent emails, attended meetings, and bowed to his authority. But in the Parker home, nobody seemed to want to cross the threshold of kindness. And Madeline, despite her bright mind and gentle heart, had learned that even the people who should care sometimes stayed away. Her mother, Sarah, tried to comfort her. She had spent the last few days decorating the house with balloons, streamers, and shiny banners that said, "Happy birthday, Madeline." But the room felt empty. Every sound of the doorbell, every ring of the phone made Madeline's heart race, with hope, and then collapse when nobody came. She had expected more, maybe a call from her friends, maybe even someone from her father's office. But as the minutes ticked by, the house felt quieter than ever. Richard Parker sat in the living room staring at the floor. He had invited everyone, every colleague, every associate, even a few business partners. But the RSVPs were polite declines, busy, out of town, other plans, excuses. He knew the truth, though. People didn't want to deal with Madeline's wheelchair, with her fragility, with the weight of seeing her different, and he hated that they couldn't see beyond it. He hated it, and it made him feel powerless. Madeline turned to her mother, her voice small. "Mom, do you think anyone will come?" Her words carried a quiet sadness that cut through Sarah's heart. "Sweetheart," Sarah said, holding her hand tightly. "Sometimes people are busy, but I promise you're loved. Always." But even as she said it, Sarah's eyes were wet. She knew the truth. The party was beautiful, the cake was ready, and the house was full of balloons. But what good were decorations without laughter, without footsteps, without someone who truly wanted to be there? Madeline's fingers traced the edge of a pink balloon. She imagined it floating high into the sky, carrying her wish with it, that someone, anyone, would see her as she was, not as a shadow of her old life. She imagined friends sitting around her, singing songs, clapping, laughing at her silly jokes. But the sound in the house was only the faint hum of the heater and the distant noise of traffic outside. Richard finally stood and walked toward the window. He watched his daughter's small face pressed against the glass, her eyes full of hope and quiet disappointment. He wanted to call someone, anyone, and demand they come, but he knew that wouldn't fix anything. The invitations had been sent, the polite refusals had been received, the clock kept moving forward, and his daughter's birthday, her special, was slipping into quiet emptiness. As the afternoon faded into evening, Madeline's shoulders drooped. She hugged her favorite teddy bear tightly, wishing it could be a friend who understood her, who would never leave her alone. Her mind wandered to the small joys she used to have before the accident, running across the yard, climbing trees, spinning in the playground. She remembered how it felt to be just another kid in the world, not someone to be pitied or avoided. And then, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, someone would surprise her. Maybe someone would knock on the door and smile at her, not as a girl in a wheelchair, but as Madeline, the girl who deserved to be celebrated. Little did she know that someone was about to arrive, and it wouldn't be who anyone expected. The clock ticked slowly in the Parker house, each second heavier than the last. Madeline sat in her wheelchair, her hands resting on her lap, staring at the empty doorway. Every sound of the doorbell made her jump with hope, only for it to fade moments later when no one appeared. She had checked the window countless times, imagining friends running up the driveway, balloons in their hands, laughter in the air. But the driveway remained empty, and the quiet of the house felt almost painful. Her mother, Sarah, moved around the room trying to straighten streamers and fluff balloons. "Sweetie, would you like to pick a song while we wait?" she asked, her voice gentle. Madeline shook her head. Music didn't fill the silence the way friends would. She hugged her teddy bear tighter and whispered, "I just wish someone would come." The words slipped out quietly, but they hung in the air, heavy and sad. Sarah's heart ached. She wanted to reach into the past, to fix what had happened, to make everything right. But she couldn't. All she could do was stay, offering what comfort she could while her daughter's eyes never left the door. Richard Parker sat across the room, his tie loosened and his mind racing. He had built empires, negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, and faced impossible challenges. Yet here, in his own home, he felt powerless. The truth gnawed at him. People who owed him respect at work didn't owe his daughter kindness. They avoided her, ignored her, and made excuses. And he hated them for it. Hated the world for not seeing that Madeline deserved to be celebrated, loved, and remembered. Occasionally the phone buzzed. Calls and messages came, but each one carried disappointment. "Can't make it, so sorry," read one text. "Family event. Maybe next time," said another. Madeline's little face fell each time. Her eyes welled up, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her teddy bear. "Why doesn't anyone want to come?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Sarah knelt beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. People sometimes don't understand," she said softly. "But you are loved. More than you know." The sun began to dip behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. Madeline's birthday cake sat untouched on the table, frosting glistening under the dim light. She had been looking forward to that cake for weeks, imagining the candles and the wish she would make. But the empty chairs around the table reminded her of the harsh truth. Today, she was alone. Even her father, the powerful Richard Parker, felt helpless. He knew nothing he could do at this moment would bring the people who mattered to her doorstep. In the quiet, Madeline started talking to her teddy bear, telling it about her dreams, her hopes, and her fears. "I wish someone would care," she said. "I wish someone would just see me. Not the wheelchair, not the accident, just me." Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of a heart that had been waiting too long for connection. Sarah and Richard exchanged a look, both hearts heavy with guilt and sorrow. They had done everything they could think of. Invites, decorations, messages. But nothing mattered if the people she wanted most didn't show up. Just when despair seemed to settle in like a dark cloud, a small sound broke the silence. A knock at the door. It was soft, hesitant, almost shy. Richard froze, his heart racing. Madeline turned toward the sound, her eyes widening, her lips parting in a quiet gasp. Could it be? Could someone finally come? Her mother rose quickly, brushing her tears and smoothing Madeline's dress. "Go on, sweetie," she said gently. "Someone is here." Madeline's heart beat faster than it ever had. She rolled her wheelchair toward the door, her hands trembling with anticipation. Her mind raced with hope, fear, and disbelief all at once. And as she reached the door, she took a deep breath, ready for whatever, or whoever, was waiting on the other side. Little did she know the arrival at her door would change everything, not just her birthday, but the way she would see the world, and the way the world would see her. The knock came again, softer this time, but it echoed loudly in the Parker house. Madeline's small hands gripped the wheels of her chair tightly. Her heart pounded like a drum. Could it really be someone? She had spent the entire day imagining this moment, hoping against hope, but never daring to believe it. Richard Parker rose from his chair, his usually composed demeanor shaken. He walked toward the door with cautious anticipation. As he opened it, he saw a boy standing there. A boy no older than 12, with dark skin, worn-out sneakers, and a backpack that looked like it had been carried through many adventures. His eyes were bright, curious, and kind, and they held a mixture of nervousness and hope. "Hi," the boy said softly, his voice almost trembling. I saw the invitation at school. Can I come in?" Madeline's eyes widened. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her lips quivered, and then a small, almost shy smile broke across her face. "Yes, yes, please," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with joy. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, and even Richard felt a lump in his throat. The boy stepped inside cautiously as if entering a new world. He looked around at the decorations, the empty chairs, the untouched cake. Then he looked at Madeline, and his nervousness melted into a warm smile. "I'm Jordan," he said simply. "I thought maybe I could be your friend today." Madeline laughed, a clear musical sound that filled the quiet house for the first time all day. "I'd like that," she said, her eyes sparkling. Her wheelchair rolled forward eagerly, and Jordan's face lit up even more. He set down his backpack and pulled out a small hand-drawn card. It was messy, colorful, and full of stick figures holding balloons and cakes. "I made this for you," he said, holding it out carefully. Madeline took the card, her eyes welling up. "It's perfect," she whispered. She held it close to her chest and looked at Jordan with wonder. No one had ever done something like this for her before. Not her classmates, not her father's colleagues, not anyone. And here was this boy, a stranger really, who had come simply because he cared. They spent the next hour together, and it felt like magic. Jordan didn't care about the fancy decorations or the expensive cake. He didn't see the wheelchair or her limitations. He just saw Madeline. They rolled a small ball back and forth, played simple board games, and sang along to the songs she loved. For the first time in a long while, Madeline forgot about being different. She laughed freely, reaching out to touch Jordan's shoulder when he made a funny face, her eyes bright with joy. Richard watched silently from the corner, his heart swelling. He had spent years building his empire, achieving power and recognition, but none of that mattered now. Here was a boy who had done something priceless. He had given his daughter attention, kindness, and a connection that money could never buy. Richard felt tears prick his eyes, but he blinked them away. He didn't want to ruin this moment. Sarah knelt beside Madeline, brushing a lock of hair from her daughter's face. "I think someone just made your birthday the best ever," she whispered. Madeline nodded, hugging Jordan tightly. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. "But I'm so glad you did." Jordan shrugged, grinning. "I wanted to. It's your day. And everyone deserves someone to care." Madeline's eyes glistened with tears. "Thank you," she whispered again. "Thank you for being my friend." Richard Parker felt something shift inside him. Watching his daughter laugh, seeing her joy, he realized that the world could be cruel and indifferent, but kindness always had the power to break through. And in that moment he silently vowed to never let his daughter feel invisible again. The room, once quiet and heavy with loneliness, now hummed with laughter and life. Balloons swayed gently, the music played softly, and Madeline's smile was brighter than the sun. And all it took was a knock on the door and a simple, brave question. "Can I?" The house, once quiet and heavy, was now alive with the sound of laughter. Madeline and Jordan had settled on the living room floor, surrounded by balloons, toys, and the untouched birthday cake. For the first time that day, Madeline forgot about being alone. Every giggle, every shared glance, felt like a small miracle. Jordan didn't care about the expensive decorations, the polished floors, or the fancy cake. He didn't notice the framed awards on Richard Parker's walls, or the gleaming furniture that cost more than most people's homes. All he saw was Madeline, the girl who had been waiting quietly for someone to care. He rolled a small toy car toward her, and she pushed it back to him with a smile that could melt hearts. "You're really good at this," Madeline said, her eyes bright. "What's your name again?" "Jordan," he replied, grinning. "And you're the fastest at rolling that car, I think." They laughed together, their joy filling the room like sunlight streaming through a window. For Jordan, it was an ordinary afternoon of friendship. For Madeline, it was extraordinary. She had waited so long for someone to see her, truly see her, and now she felt alive again. She didn't have to hide her wheelchair, her scars, or the pain she carried. Jordan didn't care. He only wanted to share the day with her. Richard, Parker watched from the corner, his hands clasped together tightly. He had spent years teaching his daughter resilience, preparing her to face a world that could be harsh, but he hadn't realized how much she longed for simple companionship. The sight of her laughing, leaning toward Jordan, made something inside him ache with pride and sadness all at once. He had tried to buy happiness for her with gifts, with invitations, with perfect planning, but none of it mattered. Not like this. Not like Jordan. Sarah moved quietly in the background, making sure the cake was ready. When she brought it to the table, Madeline's eyes sparkled. "Let's blow the candles together," she said, holding Jordan's hand. They counted down, their voices blending, and the flames flickered out in a burst of joy. Madeline clapped her hands, and Jordan grinned, proud to have been part of this small, perfect moment. After the cake, they played a game of board puzzles, rolling the dice and moving tiny pieces across the board. Madeline's laughter echoed, bouncing off the walls, filling the house with warmth. Jordan made silly mistakes on purpose just to see her laugh, and she squealed each time, her giggles like music. It was a birthday of pure, unselfish joy, a birthday made not by wealth or status, but by two hearts connecting. Richard felt a tear slip down his cheek. He wiped it quickly, not wanting to interrupt the magic between his daughter and this unexpected guest. He realized something important. Joy, real joy, doesn't come from perfection or grandeur. It comes from care, from presence, from someone who chooses to be with you when everyone else chooses not to. Jordan had given Madeline something no one else had, the gift of being seen, of being valued just for being herself. As the sun dipped, lower, casting a golden glow through the windows, Madeline leaned toward Jordan and whispered, "You know, you're the best part of my birthday." Jordan smiled, shrugging as if it were nothing. "I just wanted to come. I didn't know it would be so special." Madeline looked at her father and mother, her face glowing. "Dad, Mom, this is the happiest birthday ever." Richard felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had tried to protect her, to make her life perfect, but he had learned an important lesson. Happiness wasn't something he could buy or control. It came from the small acts of love, like a boy walking through the door, asking a simple question. "Can I?" The day that had started with silence and disappointment ended in laughter, in friendship, and in a joy that would stay in Madeline's heart forever. And as she looked at Jordan, she understood something profound. Sometimes, the smallest gestures leave the largest marks on your soul. For one special afternoon in a house filled with balloons and music, two hearts had connected, and nothing else seemed to matter. As the sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, the Parker house settled into a quiet calm. Madeline and Jordan were still sitting on the living room floor, playing with small toys and sharing stories. Their laughter had softened into warm smiles and gentle conversation. But in the corner, Richard Parker remained restless. He couldn't stop thinking about the empty chairs, the polite refusals, the absence of everyone who should have cared about his daughter. He had invited dozens of people, his employees, colleagues, business partners, people who owed him loyalty, respect, even friendship. And yet none of them had come. All of their excuses now felt hollow, meaningless. He realized with a sting of shame that his world of power and influence had no place for something as simple as compassion. They had been too busy, too distant, too afraid of something they didn't understand. And in their absence, his little girl had been left lonely on her own birthday. Richard's chest tightened as he glanced at Madeline. She was smiling now, her eyes sparkling as she laughed with Jordan, but he knew the hurt had been there. He had seen it, the small flickers of disappointment each time a knock went unanswered, each time a call went unanswered. His heart ached. He had spent so long protecting her from the world's dangers that he had not protected her from its cruelty, indifference, and fear. Madeline, meanwhile, was noticing the way her father looked at her. She had always known he cared, but tonight she could see the pain behind his eyes, the guilt, the anger, the regret. "Daddy," she whispered softly, "why didn't anyone else come?" Her small voice was steady, but the question carried a weight that pierced the room. Richard knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. "Sweetheart," he began, his voice rough with emotion. Sometimes people are afraid to face things they don't understand, afraid to deal with something different. But that's not your fault. You've done nothing wrong. It's them who failed." Madeline's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She had wanted the day to be full of friends and laughter, and it had almost broken her heart to see empty chairs and unanswered calls. And yet, here was Jordan, sitting beside her, sharing his time, his attention, his kindness. She realized something important. It wasn't the number of people who showed up that mattered, but the love that came from those who chose to stay. Richard's mind raced as he thought of the people he had called friends, colleagues, mentors, and allies. They had all let him down. Not just him, but his daughter. Anger flared inside him, a fierce, protective fire. He wanted to confront them, to demand that they see what they had missed. But then he looked at Madeline and Jordan laughing together, and he realized that no confrontation would matter as much as teaching his daughter the value of real connection. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of power and influence fall away. All the wealth, the accolades, the deals, the prestige, none of it could replace a child's joy, a friend's kindness, or the simple courage of a boy who had asked, "Can I?" Jordan's presence had filled the empty spaces in Madeline's heart far more than any grown-up ever could. Madeline hugged her teddy bear tightly and looked at her father. I think today turned out okay," she said softly, smiling through the tears. Richard felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to tell her that it was more than okay, that it was perfect, but words felt small compared to the truth of the moment. He realized something that would stay with him forever. Life was not about invitations sent, parties planned, or status maintained. Life was about showing up, choosing to care, and giving love when it mattered most. And tonight someone had done that for Madeline. One boy, one brave heart, had made her birthday unforgettable. Richard looked at Jordan, sitting quietly, a shy smile on his face, and nodded silently. In that nod, he offered gratitude that words could not capture. Madeline, sensing the quiet acknowledgement, leaned toward Jordan and whispered, "Thank you for being here." Jordan's smile widened, simple and unassuming. "I'm glad I came," he said. And in that moment, the Parker house was filled with more than toys, balloons, and cake. It was filled with love, warmth, and a lesson that would stay with all, three of them forever. The evening had settled softly over the Parker house. The sky outside glowed with fading sunlight, and the warm golden light spilled into the living room, illuminating the small figures at play. Madeline and Jordan were sitting on the floor surrounded by half-eaten cake, scattered toys and balloons that swayed gently. The house felt alive now, not because of the decorations, but because of laughter, friendship, and a simple act of kindness. Madeline looked at Jordan, her eyes wide with gratitude. "You didn't have to come," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have stayed home, done anything, but you came here. For me." Jordan shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I wanted to. It's your birthday and everyone deserves someone to care." Madeline's chest swelled. For years she had learned to hide her disappointment, to pretend that being left out didn't hurt. But tonight she didn't need to hide. Jordan's presence had erased the loneliness, the hurt, and the quiet sadness that had sat like a shadow on her heart for so long. He didn't see her wheelchair, her scars, or her quiet struggles. He only saw her, and that made all the difference. Richard Parker watched silently from the corner of the room. He had spent years trying to protect his daughter from the world, from disappointment, from people who might treat her differently. But he realized something tonight. No protection, no gift, no planning could replace the simple gift of someone choosing to be there. Jordan had given Madeline something far greater than toys or cake. He had given her attention, friendship, and the most valuable gift of all, validation. Sarah came over with a small plate of cake for Jordan. He smiled shyly and took a bite, nodding in delight. "This is really good," he said. Madeline giggled, rolling a small ball toward him. "I think you like my party," she teased. Jordan caught the ball and rolled it back. "I love it," he said simply, and that simple phrase filled the room with warmth. As the evening continued, Madeline shared her favorite stories, her small triumphs at school, and even her fears. Jordan listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging, always present. He asked questions, laughed at the right moments, and offered encouragement. For Madeline, it was like a dam had broken. Years of quiet longing, of feeling invisible, were being washed away by this unexpected friendship. Richard felt tears prick his eyes. He had worked so hard to give his daughter everything money could buy, but he had failed to understand that the greatest gift wasn't something he could buy. It wasn't the cake, the balloons, or the decorations. It was a heart that cared, someone willing to show up, someone willing to see Madeline for who she truly was. The sun dipped lower and the room darkened, but Madeline didn't want the day to end. She looked at Jordan and whispered, "You're my best friend now. I don't care if anyone else comes, you came, and that's enough." Jordan's face lit up with a bright smile. "I'm your friend," he said simply, "and I'm not going anywhere." Richard walked over and knelt beside Madeline. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Sweetheart, sometimes people fail us, but what matters is the ones who choose to stay." Jordan came when no one else did, and that's a gift bigger than anything I could ever give you. Madeline leaned into her father, her heart full. "I know, Dad. I know," she said softly. She looked at Jordan again and whispered, "Thank you for coming. You made my birthday the happiest ever." Jordan smiled, shrugging as if it were the simplest thing in the world. But for Madeline, it was monumental. His small act of courage, his willingness to step through the door and ask, "Can I?" had changed everything. He had given her joy, friendship, and a memory she would carry forever. Richard Parker realized with a quiet sense of awe that sometimes the smallest gestures leave the deepest marks. The boy who had walked in shyly and asked a simple question had taught all of them a lesson they would never forget. Life's greatest gifts were not things, but moments, and tonight they had shared one that would last forever. The house glowed with warmth, laughter, and love. For one night, in a world that had often ignored her, Madeline had been truly seen, and that was worth more than anything else in the universe. The next morning, sunlight streamed gently through the Parker house. The balloons had drooped, the cake had been eaten, and the toys lay scattered across the living room floor. But the glow from the previous evening hadn't faded. Madeline sat in her wheelchair by the window, holding Jordan's hand tightly. She wasn't thinking about the cake or the presents anymore. She was thinking about him, the boy who had walked through the door when everyone else stayed away, who had smiled at her, laughed with her, and simply chosen to be there. Richard Parker stood behind them, his hand on Madeline's shoulder. He had spent the night reflecting on the events of the previous day. His heart was heavy with regret for the people who had failed his daughter, but it was also full of gratitude. He realized something profound. Life was not about invitations sent, titles earned, or wealth accumulated. Life was about connection. Life was about showing up, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was uncomfortable. Life was about caring. Madeline turned to her father and whispered, "Dad, I'm really happy. Even if no one else came, it didn't matter. Jordan came and he made me feel normal, like me again. Richard felt a lump in his throat. He knelt beside her, looking into her eyes. Sweetheart, that's all that matters. You don't need anyone else to define your happiness, and never forget, the people who care will always find their way to you. Jordan smiled shyly from beside her. I'm always going to be here for you, Madeline, he said softly. Not because I have to, but because I want to. For Madeline, those words were more powerful than any gift she had ever received. The courage it took for Jordan to simply step into her life had taught her something she would carry forever. Kindness matters more than everything else. A single heart willing to care could fill the emptiness left by 1,000 who turned away. Richard made a decision that morning. He called a few of his closest employees, not to scold them, not to demand an apology, but to make them understand what they had missed. Compassion matters more than status or power, he said firmly. Always choose to care. If you don't, you might miss something, or someone, who matters more than you realize. He hoped his words would reach beyond the walls of the Parker house, reaching hearts that had been too busy, too distracted, too afraid. Madeline and Jordan spent the rest of the day together, laughing, playing, and creating memories that would last a lifetime. They shared stories, dreams, and silly jokes, and each moment cemented a bond that neither wealth, title, nor circumstance could ever break. As the sun began to set again, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Madeline hugged Jordan tightly. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "You didn't just make my birthday, you made me feel alive again." Jordan grinned, shrugging humbly. "I just asked a simple question, remember? Can I?" That's all it took. Richard watched, quietly, tears in his eyes. The lesson was clear. True courage and love often come in small packages. One act of bravery, one heart willing to reach out, could light up a world of darkness. He vowed never again to underestimate the power of simple kindness, the importance of showing up, and the way it could transform a life forever. Years later, Madeline would tell the story to her friends, her classmates, and even strangers she met. She would always remember the boy who asked, "Can I?" The boy who taught her the most important lesson of all, that love, courage, and friendship are far more valuable than anything money or power can buy. And for the Parker family, life changed in a quiet, profound way. They learned that sometimes the world would fail you, but one brave heart, one simple act, could heal a heart that had almost given up. That day, in a house filled with laughter, cake crumbs, and balloons, Madeline Parker learned the truth. The smallest acts of courage could create the largest changes, and love, true, simple, unwavering love, was the greatest gift of all.